all remember this vine?
Can't sleep because of that video.
That's me with this book review. Welcome back to the Panic Room, guys. I'm telling you, this is going to be probably the creme de la creme of book reviews thus far. I know we only have two, but this book messed me up. So much so that I haven't even said the damn name yet. It is The Push by Ashley Audrain. Yeah, I hope I'm saying that right. Because what you need to do is pause this video and go get it. Because if you are a fan of horror novels, thrillers, psychological trauma, you need to read this book. It's only like 250 some pages. So, for me, I was like, oh wow, it's gonna be a pretty easy read. Yeah, because I couldn't put it down. It was something else, I'm telling you. There are a few books, comment down below, tell me if you're like this. There are some books, I think for people who read a lot, that it's like they smack you in the face. Like you are physically changed after you finish reading them. Almost to the point where you can not look at certain things the same way. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I think that's a mark of really good writing, to elicit any kind of emotion. But there are some books that are just like, yeah, this is one of those books. And I'm telling you, it kind of snuck up on me. It really did. And again, mark of good writing. From what I can gather from my very limited research, because I try not to dive too deep into these books before I do this review, because I want you guys to get my raw opinion. I want you guys to get exactly what I thought just from reading the book, because I feel like that's what most people do. I feel like I remember seeing that this was this author's first book, and if that's the case, I cannot wait to read her next one. If she's watching this on the off chance, please, please, please write another book because you're awesome. So, as always, I know we were going chapter by chapter in the first couple book reviews. I'm going to scrap that again for this book because there's just so much that is happening. Just the attention to detail with this book is amazing, and it is what I think helps the reader go on this just roller coaster of just psychological every 2 pages. Let's dive in. Our main voice in this book is Blythe, and the book opens in a very interesting way. We see Blythe watching a family through a big picture window at Christmas time, and right out of the gate I saw that Blythe was really well spoken, and I remember thinking like 5 pages in, like, oh wow, she must be a writer. Sure enough, that's what she is. Because it's just something in the way she speaks. I'm sorry if you can hear that. They just started mowing. Yay. She is very descriptive, but without being boring, if you get what I'm saying. So we see her, she's talking about this family, and there is just this element of sadness to her. And so then we sort of take off. We're on this, intro into her world, how she met her husband, and you see all the little nuances that every single person who has ever fallen in love experiences, but we don't really actively think about. Stuff like, how nice it is just to like run your hands down someone's arm when you're laying beside them. Those little things. And she puts such a spin on it that you kind of feel like you're there. Like, for me, I remember those moments in my early relationship. And I love that. I love when you can kind of get sucked into a character's life. But then, sprinkled throughout the book, we get little bits and pieces of her history. And I love how they did this because it was like very matrilineal. You see a little bit of her grandmother, Etta, and the tragedy that was her life. Here, Etta falls in love, and then her life just spirals out of control. We're not going to get into the spoilers yet, but her life just kind of spirals out of control. And then we see her daughter, who is Blythe's mother, Cecilia, a lot about her childhood with Etta and how Etta's problems kind of got transferred to Cecilia. And then we see how Cecilia sort of shaped Blythe. And it's this like 3-tiered just shit cake of problems and issues and trauma. And so it kind of helps you understand your main character's voice, Blythe, better without her saying, here's why I'm this way, you know? And it was wonderful. It gives you such insight into why Blythe does what she does and why she thinks the way she does. And it gives you a lot of stuff to chew on about, you know, your own life. Like, you know, is trauma something that we carry with us? Is it something that, and when I say that, I mean, like, is trauma something that can be transferred to each person? And it makes you think about your actions and how they affect the people around you, especially children, and how they're going to carry those into the future for their own families. I mean, it's a lot, but it is told in such a way that you're just like, wow, you know, you kind of feel sorry for them, for all three of them, Etta, Cecilia, and Blythe. So we're, you know, to recap, we're talking about Etta is the grandmother, Cecilia is the mother, and Blythe is our main character. She's our main voice through most of this. We progress through the book, and Blythe and her husband decide to have a baby. And you definitely get the sense that it's not so much Blythe that wants the baby, but she loves her husband, and, you know, she wants to make him happy. So, yeah, they get pregnant. And it's a little girl. And I want to say they name her after his grandmother, Violet. And Blythe just doesn't handle motherhood well. And at this point in the book, I was like, you know, maybe she's just that kind of person, you know, motherhood is not for everyone. And that's okay. But you start to see it start to drive this wedge in between her and her husband, and she's trying, but it's like, you know, they just don't click, her and the baby. There's none, and she blames herself. There's none of that, like, motherly instinct thing happening. And then, as Violet starts to grow, you start to get these little instances about, you know, like she finally convinces her husband to put her in like a daycare 2-3 days a week. And, you know, there's instances of her being very violent. You know, I think at one point she rips out a little boy's hair. And I mean, she's like 4 at this point, right? Because this book goes over many years. To give you an idea, we start before Violet is born, and I believe the book ends when she's about 14. So we're going over a good decade, if not more. You see all these little things happening, and at first it's like, okay, maybe it is just a kid being a kid. You know, it's not right, it's not good, but, you know, kids fight, they do stupid things, whatever. Blythe starts to make you think, like, there's something more going on here. But as the reader, we're privy to all this history behind Blythe with her grandmother's trauma and her mom that we think, okay, it's probably just Blythe. You know, maybe she's projecting onto her kid. Maybe the fact that she's not loving, so to speak, is messing up her kid. So you start to think maybe it's not Violet's fault, you know, and everyone around Blythe is kind of like blaming her. And she's a lot of the time blaming herself. She really goes back and forth. You see this just whirlwind in her head about wanting to be a mom, but just not seeming to be able to get there. I think we're going to get into some spoilers here because there are a couple scenes in this book that I want to talk about. So the first scene, I feel like the first just grit your teeth, did that really just happen scene, is I think it's when Violet is 7 and Blythe has taken her to the playground and she's watching her, and as a writer, Blythe is very, very observant. Very observant. And she watches, there's a little boy running around the playground, and she's looking at Violet, and as the little boy, I guess, climbs up this big 12-foot tall slide, which, by the way, is that a thing? Like, are there slides that big anymore? Because I remember that when we were kids, like when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, but we also had metal slides that, you know, you get like 3rd-degree burns on the way down on a hot and sunny day. Like, do they still make slides that big? I mean, comment down below. Let me know. You know, my stepdaughter's like 11 years old. We don't go to the park anymore. So you see the little boy like scamper up the slide, and he's, I guess, waiting in line. And Blythe is like, I saw Violet lift her leg to trip him. And the little boy falls off the slide and dies. Blythe is trying to convince herself for the next few chapters that this did not happen. That it's just her. She recognizes that she is not the most stable individual in the world, And I believe it doesn't come out to say it, but I believe she understands that she has some family history, that she has some issues that she should work on. And that is the first step to healing, right? She keeps fighting with this in the back of her head. No, kids don't do that. Kids don't trip each other. They don't hurt each other like that. Violet's a little angry, but she didn't do something like that. So there's all these little instances, about things like, Violet flipping a switch when her father comes home. She is terrible and awful, tells Blythe she hates her, that she hopes she goes away, that she hopes she dies. But as soon as her father walks in the door, she is this sweet little angel. Same thing with her paternal grandmother. So again, everybody's sort of kind of blaming Blythe for this, thinking that it's just her lack of motherly instinct. Blythe is trying to seek out help. She's reading books and all this stuff. And you start to see the marriage, and and let me say, it is not a huge focus of the book, the marriage. It is more the family as a whole, which I appreciated. But you start to see the marriage really get strained because of Violet and the way Blythe interacts with her. This is prior to the playground incident. But where Blythe is wanting to write and Violet is screaming, so she puts her headphones on, and her husband comes home and catches her. Which, that's a little out there to let your kid just sit there and scream, I guess. We see a few years are passing. Blythe is working on herself. She's trying to get herself together. Throughout the rest of these chapters, we do get a little bit more about her mother, Cecilia, and Etta. Etta had fallen in love. This is like back in the 30s or 40s. Etta had fallen in love, and her father forced her fiance to work on the farm, who then proceeded to have an accident on the farm and die, which completely screwed Etta all to hell. Etta ends up marrying again, but only after, she finds out that she was pregnant with her now dead fiance's child, who ends up being Cecilia. Etta can't deal. And you start to see those parallels between Blythe and Violet and Etta and Cecilia. And then we get more into Cecilia's life and how she treated Blythe as a child. I'm talking about Etta locked Cecilia in a basement, crawl space for hours, stuff like that. Cecilia was this chain smoker that just up and left them one day. Blythe and her dad just left. She was on medication, treated her husband like crap, just up and left. Blythe didn't see her, I think, after the age of 12. Just disappeared one day. That's got to do something to a preteen, right? So this whole time, years are passing, and we see that whole trauma sort of playing out. Well, then Blythe gets the idea that she wants to try it again. She wants to try this whole motherhood thing again. She wants to have another baby. And I want to say at this time, Violet is maybe 7 or 8, I think. So it succeeds, and they have a little boy named Sam. And it is complete 180 from what it was with Violet. Blythe is super motherly. She is loving life. She's loving, being Sam's mother. And, people are starting to notice. Even her mother-in-law is like, oh, it's just, sometimes it's easier on the second go for some women. When Blythe's husband starts to say, I wish she was better with Violet. Well, my first thought was, what does Violet think about this, right? So we see that, Violet seems fine. At best, she likes him. At worst, she's indifferent. And then one night, I think Sam was crying. Blythe goes in, she's getting ready to feed him. And out of the wild blue yonder, she hears a voice. And Violet was in the room, just watching the baby sleep. And she says, put him down. And Blythe couldn't believe it at first. She's like, where did you come from? And in her mind, she's like, oh my God. She's thinking this whole thing about Violet killing the kid on the playground. And, oh my God, is she going to hurt my kid? And Violet's like, put him down. You need to go to bed. No, put him down. Mind you, a 7, 8-year-old kid saying this, right? So Blythe does. And takes Violet back to her room. Creepy, right? Right? Oh, it gets so much worse. So then, the next day, Blythe, Violet, and the baby are having tummy time in the living room, and Violet looks up and says, I don't want Sam anymore. And Blythe didn't think anything of it. Oh, yeah, just whatever, something kids say, right? But this whole time in the back of her head, she's remembering, all these violent outbursts that Violet has. Oh, but that doesn't happen. Kids don't do that. So the next day, they're walking down the sidewalk, their normal little route. She stops for tea at a little coffee house like she always does. And this is the scene. This is where we get the title of the book. So if you are sensitive to death, especially that of a child, here's your warning, because we are going to get to talking about this, and it isn't great. So if that's something that triggers you, please take this as your warning. So as they're walking, she has her tea in her left hand. Violet is walking beside her. She has her right hand on the baby carriage. And they stop at an intersection. All of a sudden, Violet reaches up and smacks her elbow, the one that's carrying the tea, which causes all this hot tea to go flying all over. Well, what do? You go like this, right? Throw your hands up. At that moment, she said she looked down and saw Violet heave the stroller out into oncoming traffic. And I'm sure you can guess what happened next. I'm getting chills just remembering reading that. So this absolutely sends Blythe over the edge. Absolutely. Because she remembers a couple weeks ago, Violet asking, do the cars only move when the light turns green? So I'm getting chills thinking that this little girl is, freaking Ted Bundy or something at this point. But then we proceed. That's probably midway through the book that happens, give or take. So then we proceed to just see Blythe's life crumble. She goes off to like a psychiatric facility, tries to get some treatment there. She finds out that her husband is cheating on her. And of course he thinks he is in the right because, she's losing her mind, which, marriage vows, what? That happens. Her marriage is crumbling. She's pretty much all alone because Violet doesn't want to be around her. She gets her weekend or whatever. But it is very strained. And we see the years pass and it just getting worse. Blythe, I don't even know how she's supporting herself at this point. At one point, just to tell you how strange and out there she gets, at one point she even pretends to be a different person at a mom group just so she can meet her husband's new wife. And the new wife, she finds out, has had a baby boy with him. Blythe even goes so far as, they're like best friends, right? They're texting, they're talking about kids, because Blythe tells her that she has a son named Sam. Yeah, until one day, the husband shows up and the new wife is like, oh, why don't you meet my husband with me? So, of course, everything is blown at that point. Blythe starts to worry about the new baby, Jet, her husband and new wife's son. Throughout this whole fake friendship, for a year, mind you, this went on for a year, everything seems hunky-dory. Violet is great over there. Literally, Blythe is the only person that sees anything wrong, that anything bad ever happens to. So we're getting towards the end of the book, and I'm starting to think, okay, maybe it's not Violet. Maybe Blythe is just messed up. Because you're still reading all these things about Cecilia and Etta and these two women in her past that have set up this whole just domino set of tragedy and just terrible things. And so I'm starting to think, maybe Blythe is psychologically unsound. Maybe she is a little unhinged and she's just projecting a lot of this on Violet because Violet is the next in line in this mother-daughter parade of terror. So then out of the blue, Violet is 14, I think at this point. Jet's 1, so he's still a baby. Violet asks to spend the night at Blythe's house. Blythe is okay, maybe we're getting better. In the middle of the night, because Blythe barely sleeps because of her issues, she hears Violet get up, sneak into her room, because she's asleep on the couch downstairs, sneak into her room, rummage in her drawers, and leave. Now, previously, when her husband left her husband was an architect, she took some of his tools. It's not really said why. Probably just because, she was a little off it when her husband left her after she found out he'd been cheating on her. And she remembers that she put one of those blades, because he's an architect, has to cut out all these little models. that she put one of the blades in the drawers. I remembered that blade. I don't think Blythe did. So the next day, she gets this phone call from the new wife. Did you put something sharp in Violet's clothes? No. I think one of his blades must have gotten into her pants or something. And, my husband says that he didn't bring those blades with him, that they're still at your house. And the baby got a hold of it and was getting ready to, cut his leg with it when I walked in. So Blythe immediately is like, no, Violet gave it to the baby. She wants to hurt this kid. She starts freaking out, telling the new wife, you need to watch. Violet's unhinged. She's going to hurt your baby. Get Jet away from her. Of course, the new wife's like, you're crazy. You're the crazy ex-wife. Please leave us alone. My baby's fine. So, we're back at where we began. Last chapter in the book, we're back with Blythe in the car watching this family, who we now know is her husband's new family, and Violet with the little boy, 3-ish at this point, I guess. 2, 3. Violet's 15, I think. And we see Blythe reach over and grab a manuscript. So this whole time, we've been reading her life story because she wants to give it to Violet so that maybe Violet doesn't keep on this path that her mother and her grandmother did with her. And maybe she can end the trauma, right? Because she's kind of accepted the fact that, Blythe was an innocent child. It's my fault. So Violet's noticed to her, right? And she gets out of the car and she wants to walk up there, and Violet says something. She mouths it through this big picture window. But Blythe doesn't understand her, and she says that she mouths back, "What? What did you say?" Oh, I'm getting chills. Violet lunges at the picture window, both hands up, and she mouths, oh my God. She confesses. And Blythe is just standing there, and then the blinds just close. I flipped. I was like, oh my God. Ashley, the author, Ashley Aldrin, set this up so well. I was convinced. And I went up and down. I was like, oh, maybe something is wrong with Violet. I went up and down so much thinking, okay, it is something wrong with Violet. Okay, it's just Blythe and her psychological trauma. All the way up into the end, I was like, I think Blythe is just projecting. It's just her family history. She's a poor, psychologically traumatized woman. No. Violet did it. Holy hell. I'm serious. I wish you could see it. Can you see it? I've got chills, and I don't even have the freaking book with me. And as if that wasn't enough. So the last chapter of the book, I want to say it says 2.5 years later, right? So Violet's 16-ish at this point. We see Blythe. She's meditating. She's talking about how she is doing all these mind practices to try and give herself some peace and work through her problems and all this. And she gets ready to go get in the shower, and phone goes off. And she picks it up, and it's just this babbling. Just blah, 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 blah. And it's the new wife, right? But she can't understand the thing she's saying. Just babble, babble, babble. Scream, scream, screech, screech. And the very last sentence in this book is, something's wrong with Jet. She did something to Jet. The end. So this entire time, Blythe is right. Violet is an unhinged freaking serial killer or something. I don't know. But these characters, they are so real. They are so well written. I'm telling you, there's so much more about this book that makes it good. You dive so deep into this woman, and it's dark. I'm not going to lie. Especially if you have dealt with any kind of trauma within your own family, abuses, deaths, anything of that nature. This is a dark book. It touches on a lot. But it is everything you want in a horror book. Please, if you have not read any of the other books I've reviewed on this channel and you are a horror fan, go pick this book up. But I warn you, it is dark, okay? So keep that in mind. Whew, I'm gonna need a drink after this review, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning. But guys, thank you so much for joining me again in the Panic Room. Please tell me, did you read The Push? Comment down below, let me know. Are there any other books that smacked you in the face? Tell me, I want to know. But anyway, thanks guys for coming back to the Panic Room for a book review. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.